Steve Sherlock here for Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio, available anywhere, anytime on the internet in your browser at WFPR.FM and in the local Franklin, Mass. FM radio dial. Yeah, remember that thing with the dials, the knobs, and maybe some buttons? You can preset 102.9 on the FM band. Here virtually with a town council candidate, Steve Malloy. Steve, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing this. I think it's a great service for everybody. So thank you.
You're welcome. As a voter and a resident here for many years, clearly there's not too many other options around. So, yeah, we need to know info about each of the candidates, and there's a bunch this time around. So, in order to make an informed vote on or before November 4th, that's what we're trying to do. So, I appreciate you and every other candidate for each of the roles stepping up. It's just not me. I'd rather do stuff like this in the background. But I appreciate you getting up so that I at least have something to do besides twiddling my thumbs.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
Oh, good. All right, so we'll get into this. And for the listeners, as you should be aware by now, and certainly with the other series of candidate interviews, you'll be certainly realizing the candidates do have the questions in advance so that they can prepare. I mean, these are not yes or no questions. They take a thoughtful response, and that's what we're about to do. So we have some information to make a decision. So who's Steve talking to? What's your story, Steve? To Franklin, briefly your road here, or your life within Franklin, and your involvement in the community.
Well, thanks, Steve. I was transferred, my job transferred me up to the Boston area in 1998. We didn't move till early 99. So I had the opportunity, my wife and I had the opportunity to look for a great neighborhood that we wanted to live in, making this big transfer out of the New York City area.
Hmm.
So we had our choice as to where we wanted to live, and we looked at a lot of different communities. And we chose Franklin for a couple of principal reasons. One was we loved the fact that it was a growing and building community. It had gone through so much growth over the 90s and into the
Hmm.
early 2000s. Um, we heard it was a very welcoming town. There were a lot of newcomers to town, so we felt a little more in place, if you will, with people like that. In fact, our neighborhood was filled with people who moved here from all over the country, so it was great. So that was a big factor. Of course, schools were hugely
Hmm.
important to us. We had three young kids at the time. They were all in grade school, and even the youngest, I think, was in preschool at the time. So we wanted a good foundation for them with good, solid schools and a good sense of the kind of education that they would get going forward. And they all went to public schools all throughout. Um, Commuter access to Boston was important to me, at least the first year or so it was. So I was able to take the train in on a somewhat regular, consistent schedule.
Hmm.
This is before working from home, so we actually had to go to work every day
Yes, I
with
remember those days all well.
a suit and tie.
In the hot days when sometimes the cars didn't have air conditioning, yes.
So it was that reality, not too long ago, but long enough, I suppose. So that's
Hmm.
January, we'll be here 27 years. So that's what brought us here. And, we loved it and it met all the expectations we had. It turned out to be just as welcoming as we wanted. We were really happy with the schools. We fit in very well with the neighbors here and then the community at large, largely through the kids' activities, their school activities.
Yeah.
Um, they were all involved in sports or theater. And they did that for years. And we connected through them with other families. And some of
Hmm.
my really good friends today are softball parents, as we called them. And we're still in touch 15, 18 years after our kids started to play together. So
Sure.
it was wonderful. It just kind of created a terrific community. I should also say, because it's germane to probably what we'll talk later too, back in the day, Franklin was fairly affordable,
Mm.
especially coming from the New York metropolitan area.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
The dollars went a lot further up here, and we were able to
Hmm.
get a nice home in a nice community, which we wouldn't have afforded back home. Um, so that's the road here, and that's how we wound up here. And we've been very, very happy. And it sounds trite, but we've said it many, many times. We felt blessed that we were able to find Franklin and enjoy a wonderful life here.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, I've talked with a number of folks and we all have similar stories. And yeah, I rode the train for about 20 years. I think I lost count, but it was a corporate move from Jersey at the time that brought us back. And I say back because my wife and I both grew up in Rhode Island. So corporate
Okay.
move, you're going to move me back to New England? Sure. And yeah, we found Franklin because the schools, affordability, and the train to Boston, which yeah, I use regularly. So yeah.
Yep. Yep. Well, as it turned out, my job changed a little bit. So I kind of commuted every day for probably the first 2 years. And then they switched it up on me and I had a different region to cover. So I worked at
Ah.
home from Mondays and Fridays. Talk about being an early adopter of that
Mm-hmm.
policy. And then I would hop on a plane on Tuesday and come back Thursday night. So,
Ouch. Oh yeah. Real commute that way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we didn't go remote until 2016 with a different company. And then it was interesting because on the one hand, at that time, we were doing kind of a worldwide corporate policy, privacy, information protection, et cetera. And it made more sense to have a Hong Kong phone call in the morning or afternoon without having to try to catch the train.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the group also determined we were going to work from work on Wednesdays because we still needed to talk to each other anyway.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yes. But anyway, more about you, not about me. So, next question, civil discourse is a key component of our democratic republic form of government. The political party divide, unfortunately, is wider now than ever. And as an individual, what can and will you do to help bridge or avoid the divide here in Franklin?
Well, I guess my first answer to this is if I could, I would sort of blow up social media.
Hey,
Um, and I think that has proved it's ironic because it was intended to be a tool to create connectivity, and I think
yes,
it's done the opposite. It's put people into their own bubbles, and they talk largely to people who agree with them. And when they do interact with others, it's just very easy to be nasty. It's very easy to be aggressive, and I just think it's a complete waste of time. I don't do Facebook. I never did. I don't want any part of it. Um, I'm kind of old school in the sense that I love debate. I love classic argument
mm-hmm,
around, a position I might have and somebody else would have a differing opinion. I wish there were more forums to have detailed discussions about policy differences and so forth.
yes,
But I think a lot of it starts with the foundation that I think people naturally have and social media takes away, which you should get to know the person that you're talking to. Just as you said, who are
right,
you? Where are you from? What's your
yep,
background? What'd you do this? So you kind of start with that fundamental respect of that individual.
mm-hmm,
And you don't take cheap shots and you stay within the bounds of a good discussion or argument about a particular topic. The other thing that I think social media enables is what I would just call laziness. People
mm,
don't want to do the hard work to communicate well. And to me, that's 80% listening and 20% talking. And I like to think that I'm a very good listener. The jobs that I've had and things that I've done has required me to be a very careful and good listener. And I think I
mm-hmm,
am. And you couple that with a foundational respect for who you're talking to, I think you can have constructive criticism.
right,
I think today we all have to be ready to engage in that and do that. I've attended a lot of council meetings over the last number of years, and you see people who are good at it, not on the council, but I just mean in the audience
sure,
of, who goes over the top and who doesn't. And I'm always chagrined because you walk away with a wasted opportunity to learn something or whatever. It
mm,
becomes very unproductive. So I mean, if elected, try to redouble my efforts to try to do that. I'd love to find more opportunities to have casual conversations with
mm-hmm,
people, to kind of know what's important to them, explain maybe my thinking, hear their thinking in some detail, so we could have kind of a learn from one another.
yes,
And then to call out unfair and wrong and inaccurate assertions that people make. I think one of the things that's been lost in this social media craze is truth.
Hmm.
People are very fast to assume what they read online is right, or
Yeah.
very fast to assume what they saw in the news, or listen to somebody who's going second and third and fourth hand about information. Like I said before, it takes hard work to communicate well, and you need to take the time to ask questions, get the truth, and kind of take the conversation from there.
Hmm.
So I'll do my level best to be that kind of communicator and that kind of an audience for people who are interested in having those sorts of conversations. And I'd like to think I'd be fairly assertive in shutting down um, the poorer elements of the communication that we see.
Hmm. Yeah. No, thank you for that. And what experience or background will help you serve in this particular role? Or another way to phrase it is, what do you bring to the table that you think would help set you apart from the others competing for this role?
Well, my background, I've had 40 plus year career with big public accounting firms. And in that realm, I had a couple of different jobs. The first was around office operations and infrastructure. That's what got me to move here, as I was in
Hmm.
charge of all the operations for our Northeast offices and then our Southeast offices. So I think from a business perspective, I've run big operations, big budgets, capital budgets, as well as operating budgets. So I know that from the corporate perspective. Um, so all of the budgeting and all of the operational costs and capital plans don't scare me. I kind of have a good foundation in what
Hmm.
that's all about.
Sure.
So I think
Yeah,
that
budget's a
prepare
budget.
right. So I think that prepares me to, make some contributions to those discussions. Um, so I think that background helps. And then later in my career, the last 20 years or so, I was in our corporate security department and most notably kind of set up our crisis management and business continuity operations
Yes.
for the firm.
Sure.
So I have some experience with hot topics and urgent kinds of things,
Hmm.
and I think I could be fairly responsive and kind of get down to the nitty gritty of what has to happen and when. So I think that that kind of perspective could possibly help in some of the issues that we might face going forward. Um, so I think just that kind of background and those kinds of skills and experience, I think are well suited. Maybe not directly related to local
Hmm.
government necessarily, but I like to think I'm, capable of getting with the program and contributing maybe some new perspectives and new ideas to the council.
Right. Yeah, I think just from one aspect, certainly our fire chief is our emergency management agent leader. And I think with your background, that'll help uh, provide some additional bridges within the community because you understand that part. And yeah, I've got a security background and crisis preparedness as well, one of the aspects of one of my career slices. But yeah, I think that would be appreciated, at least from my point of view on where we're going. But it's not about me; it's about everybody else too. So now we'll go to the council specifically. And one of the key responsibilities for the council is to hire and provide oversight for the town administrator and his or her team. For example, while you can serve as an escalation point for the town folk, does not include micromanaging a particular department or operation. Do you agree or disagree? And please elaborate with that.
I do agree. Obviously, that's the way it's structured, and I think it's a good structure. I don't want to be the town administrator. Um, But as a council, I think we set the direction for the administrator to kind of follow the principles that we
Hmm.
set out. And it's his job to effectuate those policies and changes across the government itself. I don't, I mean, I'm happy to collaborate on things, and we'll probably get into some of this a little bit later. So I'm not shirking any of those kinds of responsibilities. I want to be a team player. I want to participate in some subcommittees and kind of make contributions however I can.
Hmm.
I should have said earlier, I am retired now, so I have some time.
You got a little bit of
Uh,
bandwidth, yes.
yeah, and I'm happy to kind of commit to contributing where and how I can. But
Hmm.
fundamentally, to your question, town administrator does the administration, the town council sets the direction for what those policies needs to be. I would also add to that that I think the council takes its direction from the voters.
Hmm.
You can kind of roll it back. If the voters elect you to that office, that's an implicit directive to those individuals to set the policies, set the directives or the imperatives for the town council, a town administrator to effectuate across his domains.
Hmm. Sure. And then one of the other pieces, certainly of the council, is you approve the annual budget, for which you've already said you're kind of familiar with budgeting, so that's a help, which indeed sets the priorities, which you've also said in terms of how Franklin operates. So, faced with the fiscal challenges for the next several years, what are the financial priorities you think we need to address? And I understand as well, this is kind of like a three-part question. That's the broad one, but then two kind of sub-questions. What do you need to explain, or how do you explain what needs to be done to the voters and residents? And then secondarily, what would you do to help the community understand the separation of roles between the council and the school committee? And as you go along, if you need to get a refresher, feel free to do so.
Sure, sure. Um, well, just the initial gist of that in terms of financial priorities, I think it's very important that we honor the two failed override votes that we've had the last 2 years. I think it's very important to recognize that the majority of those voters did not vote for an override. So we need to prioritize saving money. We need to work through the budget. And I don't know what the deficit's going to be this year. I'm sure we'll know that in time. But I think the notion of another override should be kind of off the table right out of the bat. People have spoken twice, and I think we need to honor that. That turns the priority back to what are we spending, where are we spending it, and how are we going to manage that? And again, I don't want to be the town administrator, but I think we need to have a thorough kind of review of where the money's spent, how it's spent, and how can we make up whatever that deficit is.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's going to be 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever it's going to be. We'll know in time. But I think that's our marching orders as the town has directed to us. I know not everybody agrees, but we have to listen to what the voters have said, and we got to figure out a way to do that. How that gets done, I guess, can happen a number of different ways. But as I look at it, the priority is we got to save whatever the deficit amount's going to be. So we go through the budget and we look at the big line items in there in terms of where is most of the money being spent.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of smaller categories in there for two and three and $400,000. Some of them are tens of thousands of dollars. That's not a good use of time. We got to look at public works. We got to look at schools. We'll talk more about that in a second. We got to look at fire, police, the big areas and do a deeper dive into what efficiencies we can create from there. I don't necessarily want to go right to head count
Hmm.
necessarily, but are there
Sure.
other spending priorities that we can change? Are there operational efficiencies that we can think through? Just like we did with the regional dispatch, are there other opportunities to look at some of those admin functions in conjunction with other towns or county or whatever to kind of get the leverage of size and scale that maybe makes it cheaper and maybe better, right? Maybe I think there's opportunities to kind of look at some of those things and figure out if we can provide better services for less money.
Hmm.
Sounds pie in the sky, I get it, but I think we need to take that kind of approach rather than just 5% across the board. I think we can do a better job, wind up with better results, and save money. So I think the priority is saving money based on what the voters have told us. I think the approach needs to be more collaborative. I would like to direct the town administrator to take that approach and come up with other ideas in terms of where we could save. Obviously, the finance committee would be involved in these
Hmm.
things. Schools, of course, it's a big part of the budget, but I think we need to look at everything, keep an open mind, and figure out how we're going to put that together.
Good. Thank you for that. Then I think based upon whatever the decisions that would lead into how you would explain what needs to be done once the plan is determined or as it's being developed, if I may be so bold.
Right. And I'll talk more about this in terms of your last question, but I think communication with residents is really critical.
Hmm.
Um, so as this process emerges, we need to find a way to not only make information available. We've joked, I'd love to make Franklin Matters required reading for everybody because you cover a lot, but we need to recognize that a lot of people don't look at it. Um, So I think communicating to people what we're thinking about, how we're doing that, soliciting that feedback, even if it's additional kind of ad hoc meetings or venues or forums where people could kind of speak up on that. The
Hmm.
listening session we did last year with the budgets, I think was a good idea. I'd like to see something similar to that. But I'd like to see broader options in terms of where money could be spent. The other element of this, Steve, is I'd love to ask people who work for the town, work in the schools,
Mm,
where do you think we can save money? What
right.
could be done better?
Sure.
So I think not only input from the community, but from the actual individuals that work in these organizations. I think that's a very important source of information.
Absolutely. I concur. Yeah, and the one other, and I've advocated in other channels too, but I think the one, while listening sessions, yes, I agree, were good, and there were six of them spread around. The one aspect I think would be helpful is to have more of a workshop piece so that if somebody comes forward with the idea, well, let's work through the numbers and see what that does instead of just kind of talking about it and then going on, talking about it and going on. Some of those I think could be helpful to truly dig in and let's see what see what the numbers say and see how the dominoes fall.
And to keep an open mind, I think there's what I noticed through the listening sessions and just in general, and I say this respectfully, I don't mean it as a bad thing. It's just the nature of organizations. I think
Hmm.
people become convinced of a particular mindset or a default position of that won't work because,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
this won't work because. I think we need to be broader minded about potential cost savings. Um, Kind of air out, just like you said. Well, what would that mean? How much money would we save? Who's impacted? Is that a good thing, bad thing? How do we mitigate some of that? Um, so yeah, I like the workshop idea a lot. I think that could be very, very useful.
Hmm. And then the last aspect of that was kind of the separation between council and school committee, so that because I think there's still a tendency for some misunderstanding of the role separation.
Right. It is critical. There's a definite firewall there. I think mass general laws have kind of set up school
Hmm.
committees are independent. They're not to be run by the town council or mayor or other organizations. So they have that independence. And just like the town administrator has a specific role and responsibility, so too do the schools. I think they converge and come together when it's time to roll up a larger budget.
Hmm.
So I think the town council, as stewards of the residents' tax dollars, need to have some input in terms of overall total dollars. But we got to give the school committee and the schools the latitude to decide where and how they think that spending best fits their goals and objectives for the kids and the education. With that, I look through the school budget and I have a lot of questions on, certain line items and certain dollar amounts and so forth. And I love to find out more about how
Hmm.
that all works. So I think we should be free enough to kind of have that exchange, and I would expect that would be normal. But I do recognize the difference. Happy to represent that to others who may not agree. I think the town council has, uniform authority over everything. That's not the case, and I don't think it should be. I think it's a good structure that we have.
Right. Yeah. Separation of roles and duties,
Right.
checks and balances are built in. Yep. And the final question, the final key question, we do have one after this, but do you support the goals and recommendations of the 2025 Franklin Master Plan? And if so, what would you do as a town councilor to help implement them? And if not, why not?
Um, I think it's a fascinating document. I read it when it first came out and kind of
Hmm.
went through a lot of it in some level of detail. It's amazing how much information is in there. Demographic information,
Yeah.
other statistics and data about the town, its history, its current standing. It's good to read just for that kind of perspective.
Hmm.
So it does give you a very good background on all of that. So I thought that was interesting. I would say I mean, there are things in there that I would support, and there are things that I wouldn't support.
Hmm.
I think my larger objections to it is mostly around housing, in terms of housing diversity and so forth. There seems like a very clear push within the master plan to further densify Franklin. And we've all seen a lot of these massive apartment buildings that have gone up in town. And I, in my experience, just talking with lots of people, many, many, many folks don't like them
Hmm.
for a couple of reasons. Um, but more fundamentally to me, I'm trying to think of what's the objection, what's wrong. And to me, it's changing the nature of the suburban neighborhood that we chose personally, and I think
Hmm.
many other people have chosen to live here. Adding that many people into smaller lots, I know it has benefits in terms of environmental considerations and it allows for more, open space opportunities. But we need to recognize that that's changing the suburb mentality. I
Hmm.
don't think we need to apologize for wanting to live in single family home lot subdivisions. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And what I don't like about the master plan is it's a very directed emphasis on more dense housing, developing especially 140 with more dense housing and strip malls and just adding all of that additional housing with the infrastructure we have. I don't think we can support it. And what's missing is the quality of life degradation that goes along with that. I think people who moved here who wanted a good commercial strip, there's lots of services and restaurants and so forth on 140. Adding that many more people along that strip of road is just going to add to density, traffic congestion. My life, I've lived in Queens, New York for a long time. I lived in an old apartment building. It's probably 100 years old right now.
Hmm.
And it was very dense, and we walked everywhere, and we did this and we did that, but it was built for that. There were
Sure.
huge boulevards
Right.
every couple of, 100 yards where you could navigate your way through. We don't have that, and I think we're trying to force feed that into certain areas in town, and it's changing the dynamics of why people, I think, chose to live here. I think I'll be kind. I'll say it's well intended for different purposes, but we're losing sight of the fact of what a suburban community is, and we're forfeiting those benefits in furtherance of a different objective in terms of other density and walkability and buses and stuff like that. And I just, to go back to the master plan for a second, it's as good as it is, as thorough as it is. And there's 50 pages of recommendations I've gone through, and I've highlighted a bunch that I completely disagree with.
Hmm.
ODBs, for example, there's items in there that say we need to adopt that and expand more, and I'm totally against that. Um, so in summary, how do you say there's some elements that are good? Largely, I disagree with most of it. As a directional document, okay. If I'm on the town council, I'm not going to look to that as, a Bible or a directive in terms of decisions that we want to make. Because I think there is many areas of that that I disagree with. And would add, I think most of the town would probably disagree with most of it too.
Hmm. Okay, that's fair. And while we've covered kind of the six major questions that the council candidates have altogether, so we can have a comparison, if you will,
Yeah,
is there another topic or something else that we haven't covered that you want to have the time to say, wow, we have this platform and an opportunity?
thank you. Again, having attended lots of meetings the last couple of years, seeing what you publish every day and the Franklin Observer publishes every day, I would love to see the council, town administrator, Schools I'm not as familiar with because my kids are all in their 30s now, so I don't see a lot of that.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's incumbent on the town leadership to find ways to push information to people. And I know that sounds easy to say, but I really think we need to make a concerted effort to explain what's happening to people.
Hmm.
So this will help a lot with budget discussions and how all that works.
Right.
But relying on people to find it themselves, go to the website, as well as that's set up, and it's not too hard to navigate. I mean, it gets tricky at times, but it's a website. I get it. I think we need to adopt a much more aggressive push mentality in terms of how we get information to people.
Hmm.
If that's getting people to sign up for email newsletters, when your water bill goes out, check a box that you want to add your email to further contact.
Right.
I think it's critical that we demonstrate a commitment to do that, and then we try different ways, methodologies to kind of get word out to people. I think that goes a long way towards assuaging some of the distrust that's out there.
Hmm.
People will get a sense of what's happening, and hopefully they'll get a sense of that this is a sincere group of leaders who really want to inform everybody about what's happening. So that's one area I would definitely like to see some improvements.
Good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, thank you again for taking time. Hopefully, the listeners will appreciate this, get more info, and then we'll include a slide with your contact info, phone number, etc., so that if they have any particular points of interest to follow up with you again, other
That'd be
than
great.
maybe it's some of the farmers markets or somewhere other outs and around between now and election day, then they can do that, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. And a quick reminder, we do this because Franklin matters.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.